I never expected a quiet Tuesday evening to shatter everything I thought I knew about being a father, but that is exactly what happened the moment I wheeled my daughter into the Maple Harbor Diner. The bell above the door chimed softly as we entered a gentle sound that should have felt welcoming, but instead it echoed through my chest like a reminder of how out of place we were. The warm smell of coffee and grilled sandwiches drifted through the room, a comforting blend that belonged to the people who fit effortlessly into the world. People who did not have to worry about whether their child would eat tonight or stare through them as if they were made of glass. I adjusted Scarlett's pink coat, tucking it around her small shoulders. Her head rested slightly forward, her fingers curled in against her palms, motionless except for the faintest twitch every now and then. She was 13, but some days she looked impossibly small, as if grief and illness had pressed her into something fragile enough to break in my hands. A hostess with a polite smile approached, glancing at me, then at my daughter. "Two for dinner," she asked. "Something quiet," I replied, my voice lower than I intended. She nodded and led us to a booth in the back, away from the chatter and clinking silverware, as if she instinctively knew we needed distance from the world. I slid into the seat. Scarlett remained silent. She always did. The menus landed on the table, but I barely touched mine. I watched Scarlett instead, hoping for a sign of interest, a flicker of engagement, anything at all. Nothing. Only that faraway stare that had replaced the bright eyes she used to show the world before her mother died. I swallowed hard and tried to focus. I needed to get her to eat something. Anything. A waitress approached a notepad tucked into her apron. "Good evening. My name is Emily. What can I get started for you?" She sounded warm, gently upbeat, like someone who saw the person in front of her rather than the burden. I ordered a grilled turkey sandwich for myself and something soft for my daughter. Soup, maybe. Something she won't choke on. Emily looked at Scarlett with a softness in her eyes that I had not seen in a long time. "I can do chicken and rice. It is gentle on the stomach." I nodded. "Thank you." When Emily left, I reached for Scarlett's hand, letting my thumb graze her knuckles. She didn't react. She rarely did. I used to believe if I just tried harder, she would come back to me, but lately, I wasn't sure she even knew I was there. Minutes later, Emily returned with our food, setting the warm bowl in front of Scarlett. "Let me know if you need anything." She walked away without the pity I was so used to seeing from people. I picked up the spoon. "All right, sweetheart. Let us try." I lifted a small amount of the chicken broth and raised it to her lips. The moment the spoon neared her, Scarlett jerked her hand upward, knocking it from my fingers. The metal clattered across the table and broth splashed onto the white cloth. A few customers turned to look. My jaw tightened. Not at her. Never at her. I hated that people did not understand that she could not help it. I hated the way their eyes lingered, weighing us, judging us. I forced a steady breath and reached for the spoon again. "Scarlett, please." Nothing. She stared at the table, her fingers pressing into the fabric of her dress. I tried again and again. Each time she pulled back or turned away, refusing the food like it was something dangerous. My chest tightened with that familiar helplessness, the kind that made me feel like I was failing her in every way a father could. I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to steady myself when I heard someone step beside me. "May I?" It was Emily, kneeling beside Scarlett's wheelchair. I hesitated. Usually, I would have told her no. I had hired therapists, specialists, teachers, and none of them had been able to reach her. Why would a waitress succeed where experts had not? But something in her expression made me pause. She was not intruding. She was offering. I handed her the spoon. Emily shifted so she was level with Scarlett's eyes. She did not rush. She did not force anything. "Hi there," she said softly, as if speaking to an old friend. "You do not know me yet, but I am Emily." Scarlett did not respond, but for the first time that night, she did not turn away either. Emily dipped the spoon gently into the broth. "When I was your age," she said quietly, "my grandma used to tell me that warm soup feels like a hug for your tummy. Would you like to try a tiny one?" She waited, not pushing, not assuming. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Scarlett's fingers twitched. I inhaled sharply. Emily smiled. "Just one little sip, sweetheart." Slowly, tenderly, she brought the spoon to Scarlett's lips. And this time, my daughter did not pull away. The broth touched her mouth and she swallowed. My breath caught. It was one sip. Just one. But for my daughter, it was everything. Then something happened that nearly brought me to my knees. Scarlett looked at Emily, not past her, not through her, at her. And then she smiled. A small, fragile smile I had not seen since my wife died. My heart cracked wide open. Everything changed in that moment. I just did not know it yet. I carried Scarlett through the front door that night with a strange tightness in my chest, the kind that sits somewhere between disbelief and hope, and I was almost afraid to breathe, too deeply terrified that the moment would shatter if I acknowledged it out loud. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to comfort me before my wife passed, but now felt heavy like a room filled with echoes that had nowhere to go. I set Scarlett gently in her wheelchair, her small body limp from exhaustion, but even then, even with her eyes half closed, I could still see it. That faint spark in her expression. That tiny smile that had appeared in the diner as she sipped the soup from Emily's spoon. It was the first real human reaction she had shown in months, and it had not been triggered by me, nor by a therapist, nor by a specialist whose hourly rate could pay someone's rent. It had been a waitress. A young woman with a soft voice and steady hands. I wheeled Scarlett down the hallway toward her room. Her pink nightlight glowed faintly against the wall, casting soft shapes across the floor. I lifted her into bed, tucking her blanket beneath her chin, the way my wife used to do. My hands lingered near her cheek, brushing a strand of hair away from her forehead. For a moment, her eyes flickered toward me. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough that my heart stumbled. I sat there longer than usual, watching her breathing settle, watching her lashes flutter. I whispered goodnight, even though she never answered, and stepped out of the room, pulling the door almost closed, leaving it open just a sliver so I could hear her if she needed me. I walked down the hall into the kitchen and leaned both hands on the counter, letting the weight of the evening crash into me. The house felt bigger than ever. I looked around the empty living room at the framed photographs lining the fireplace mantel. In one picture, my wife held Scarlett on her lap, her smile bright and full, her hair catching the sunlight just right. In another, Scarlett laughed with her whole body, her curly hair bouncing as she reached toward the camera. I stared at those photos until my vision blurred. She used to smile like that. She used to laugh like that. And now a stranger had brought that spark back. I sank slowly into a chair at the edge of the room, elbows on my knees, head in my hands. The silence pressed in on me from every corner. It was the kind of silence that didn't just fill a room. It crawled into your thoughts, pulled you backward into every moment you wished you could change. My mind replayed the scene at the diner, the spoon, the twitch of her fingers, the sip, the smile. The way Emily had looked at her with such warmth as if Scarlett were fully present and whole, and not the fragile ghost of a child she had become. I had never seen anyone speak to Scarlett like that. Not since my wife. Everyone else talked around her to me about her as if she were a puzzle missing too many pieces to fix. Emily did not treat her like that. She had spoken gently, honestly, as if she believed Scarlett could hear her, as if she believed Scarlett mattered. I closed my eyes and rubbed my forehead. Why had it been so easy for her? Why had this waitress reached my daughter in one moment when professionals had spent months trying and failing? I wanted to be grateful. I wanted to hold on to the hope I felt, but there was something else underneath, something sharp, something I did not want to admit. It hurt. It hurt that someone else could do what I had not been able to do. It hurt that my daughter smiled for Emily and not for me. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't anger. It was grief wearing a new face. I stood up abruptly, unable to stay still. I walked back to the hallway and paced slowly, passing Scarlett's bedroom door over and over, listening to the soft sound of her breathing. I felt like a man suspended between two worlds, one full of memories I could never get back, and the other full of possibilities I was almost too afraid to reach for. Eventually, I stepped into my study. Papers covered my desk, medical reports, therapy plans, schedules, notes from specialists. All the things I had clung to for direction, all the things that had led nowhere. I dropped into my leather chair, staring at the documents without seeing them. The room felt hollow. The silence grew heavier, and in that thick, suffocating quiet, something inside me cracked open. I whispered out loud, though no one was there to hear it. "What if she can help her?" The words sounded fragile, like they were made of glass. But then came the second thought, the one that changed everything. What if she's the only one who can? I leaned back in my chair and exhaled shakily. The silence in the house felt different now. Less like a void, more like a moment before something shifts. A room full of silence, but for the first time in a long time, it wasn't completely empty. Somewhere inside that stillness, a tiny thread of hope began to form, delicate and trembling, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I would go back to the diner. Tomorrow I would find her. I just didn't realize then how much that choice would change the rest of my life. The next morning came far too early, the kind of morning where the air felt heavy and the rising sun seemed almost hesitant to touch the world outside. I had barely slept, drifting in and out of restless thoughts, replaying the moment from the diner again and again. A simple spoon of soup, a smile, a spark. I kept telling myself I had imagined it, that grief and exhaustion had blurred my vision. But every time I walked past Scarlett's room and saw her sleeping peacefully with a softness I had not seen in years, the truth pressed against my ribs. Something had changed, and it hadn't changed because of me. I dressed quickly, pulling on a shirt without caring whether it was wrinkled, and made a cup of coffee I barely touched. The silence in the house felt sharper today, like it had been waiting to confront me with all the things I had been trying to ignore. Around mid-morning, I wheeled Scarlett into the kitchen, her small frame wrapped in a warm cardigan. She didn't lift her head, but something felt different about the stillness surrounding her. I kneeled beside her and gently brushed her arm. "Good morning, sweetheart." Her fingers twitched. It wasn't much, it wasn't even clear, but it was more than I usually got. And the moment it happened, I heard Emily's voice in my mind, speaking to her with so much patience and warmth. I realized then that I wasn't just going back to the diner because I needed answers. I was going back because I needed hope. I strapped Scarlett carefully into her car seat and placed her stuffed bunny beside her. She held it loosely, her fingers curling around the fabric without thought. I sat behind the wheel, staring at the steering wheel for a long breath, gathering the courage I didn't think I needed as a grown man. But this wasn't business. This wasn't the boardroom or a negotiation or anything I had ever been good at. This was about my daughter. And the truth was, when it came to her, I often felt like a stranger fumbling in the dark. The diner parking lot was half full when we arrived. The morning rush had ended, but the late breakfast crowd had begun to fill the booths. I lifted Scarlett from the car and settled her into her wheelchair before pushing her toward the entrance. The bell above the door chimed softly when we entered. The warm scent of coffee and cinnamon rolls hit me instantly. For a moment, I just stood there feeling strangely out of place. The same hostess from last night glanced up, recognition flickering in her eyes. "Morning," she said gently. "Would you like the same table?" I nodded. "Yes, please." She led us toward the booth, but I wasn't looking at the seats or the menu or the bustling kitchen. I was scanning the room for one face. And then I saw her. Emily stood behind the counter, wiping down a tray with slow, thoughtful movements. Her hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, and she had a faint smudge of flour on her sleeve again. She looked tired, but not in a defeated way, more like someone who carried a long day with quiet resilience. When she looked up, our eyes met. Something in her expression shifted just slightly, like she was trying to decide whether to smile or brace herself. I raised a hand awkwardly, unsure if she even wanted to see us again. She hesitated, then walked toward our booth. "Morning," she said softly, her gaze flicking to Scarlett. "How's she doing today?" "Better," I said, my voice rougher than I meant for it to be. I thought it was best to avoid mentioning last night outright, afraid I would sound desperate or clingy or overwhelmed. But the truth was, she had given Scarlett something that no one had given her in a long time. Connection. Emily knelt again, just like she had done before lowering herself to Scarlett's level without any hesitation. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered gently. "Did you sleep okay?" Scarlett didn't respond, but her fingers twitched again, just slightly. Emily noticed. Her eyes softened. "I see you," she whispered. Something rippled through me, a strange mixture of awe and something dangerously close to relief. No therapist had ever spoken to Scarlett like that. Emily stood slowly brushing her hands on her apron. "Can I get you anything soup?" I said without thinking. "The same as last night." "For her." Emily nodded. "Of course." When she walked away, I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. I watched her move through the diner, greeting customers, carrying plates, navigating the chaos with ease. I found myself studying her, not because she had done something miraculous last night, not because she had reached my daughter in a way I could not, but because there was something honest in her, something grounded, something I recognized but had not seen in years. The soup arrived steaming and warm. Emily set the bowl in front of Scarlett and handed me a spoon. "Would you like to try feeding her today?" The question stunned me. I stared at the spoon as if it were a test I wasn't prepared to take. "I don't think she'll respond to me." Emily stepped closer, her voice calm. "She might. You're her dad. That matters more than you think." My throat tightened. I hesitated, then dipped the spoon into the broth, lifting it carefully. Scarlett didn't pull away. She didn't react. But she didn't resist either. I brought the spoon to her lips. A drop of soup touched her mouth. She swallowed. It was tiny. It was almost invisible. But it was a spark that hit me so hard my eyes burned. I looked at Emily. She smiled just barely. "There he is," she whispered softly. "The first spark." And in that moment, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Hope. The rest of the morning at the diner passed in a blur of quiet moments that felt heavier than anything I was prepared for, and yet strangely gentle in a way that made my chest tighten. After that first spoonful, Scarlett accepted. Emily stepped back without pressing further, giving me space to try again. And when I did, Scarlett opened her lips a second time, then a third, each small swallow a victory. I didn't know how to hold without shaking. By the time the bowl was half empty, her breathing had steadied into a rhythm I recognized from years ago, a kind of calm she used to have when her mother would sit beside her bed, humming softly. I sat there frozen, unsure whether to cry or laugh or simply sit in stunned silence. Emily placed a hand gently on the table, not too close, not intrusive, just present. "You did that," she whispered. "Not me. You." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that the only reason I had been able to hold the spoon steady was because of her, because something about her presence made the air feel less impossible, but the words stuck in my throat, tangled with emotions I couldn't sort out. When the check arrived, she didn't reach for her wallet this time. Maybe she sensed the shift. Maybe she wanted me to hold the moment without dependency or embarrassment. She simply slid the leather folder onto the table, gave me a small smile, and walked away to tend to another customer. I watched her move around the diner, her steps fast, her hands steady, her voice soft but direct as she refilled cups of coffee. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't performing. She was just living, and somehow that made everything she did feel real in a world where so much of my life had become curated, controlled, and calculated. A part of me didn't want to leave, afraid the fragile progress Scarlett made would fade the moment we stepped back outside. But I couldn't sit there all day clutching the memory of a smile and a spoon like some desperate man chasing miracles. As I wheeled Scarlett toward the door, Emily glanced up, her expression unreadable for a moment. "Take care of her today," she said softly. "She's tired. Try not to push too much." I nodded, trying to hide the fact that her voice made something inside my chest stir. "Thank you, Emily." She held my gaze for a heartbeat longer than necessary, then turned away quickly as if afraid of what might show on her face. Outside, the cold air hit us instantly. I wrapped Scarlett's blanket tighter around her small frame, and her fingers curled slightly around the edge as I pushed her toward the car. The moment we pulled into the driveway at home, the house felt different. Not less quiet, not less heavy, but different. A shift in the air like someone had opened a window somewhere and let possibility drift in. I lifted Scarlett from her chair and carried her inside, her arms dangling softly at her sides. As I settled her gently onto the couch, her head rested against my chest for a moment longer than usual. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't even intentional. But her cheek pressed lightly against my shirt, and her breath warmed the fabric as she sighed. My throat tightened. That tiny gesture, whether conscious or not, felt like the world cracking open just enough to let light sneak through. I spent the afternoon trying to keep my mind focused on work, but every email blurred, every call felt unimportant, every notification irritated me. I shut my laptop 3 times before finally giving up. Instead, I sat across from Scarlett, just watching her as she slowly tapped the edge of a pillow with her fingertips. Before yesterday, that small repetitive movement had annoyed me, made me feel like a failure. Today, it felt like part of her language, one I needed to learn instead of fight. As evening approached, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Are you the man with the little girl from the diner?" My stomach dropped. I immediately typed back, "Who is this?" A few seconds passed, then a reply. "The manager. Nothing serious. Just letting you know that your waitress friend swapped shifts tonight. Thought you'd want to know in case you were planning to come back." Friend. The word hung in the air longer than it should have. I typed a simple thank you and put the phone face down. I didn't know why that information mattered so much or why disappointment stung sharper than expected. I shouldn't care. Emily was just a waitress who had a way with kids. That was all. That had to be all. But as I sat there trying to convince myself, something inside me wavered. Something quiet. Something honest. Something I didn't want to name. That night, Scarlett refused dinner. Normally, I would have felt panic creeping in, the old cycle of fear that she would regress, that I would fail her again. But instead, I made her a bowl of warm broth. I sat beside her and didn't lift the spoon. I just held it in my hand and whispered softly the same way Emily had. "Just a little hug for your tummy, sweetheart." She blinked. Her fingers twitched. I stayed patient. And after a long moment, she opened her lips just enough for one sip. It wasn't as smooth as the diner. It wasn't magical or profound. But it was real. When I tucked her into bed later, she didn't turn away from me. She stared at the wall with her slow, drifting eyes, and her fingers found the edge of my sleeve, gripping it lightly the way a child might hold on to the last edge of a day before falling asleep. I sat there long after she drifted off, staring at her small hand on my wrist. And for the first time since her mother died, it didn't feel like I was standing alone between her and a world she couldn't understand. Someone else had stepped into that space, even if just for a moment. Someone who didn't run from difficulty, who didn't pity her, who saw her. The truth wavered inside me, then a truth I wasn't ready to speak aloud. I needed to see Emily again. Not because she helped Scarlett, not because she gave us hope, but because something inside me had shifted the moment she looked at my daughter like she deserved the world. And something else shifted when she looked at me like I wasn't failing. The next morning arrived heavy with a kind of restless energy that clung to the air. I woke before dawn, the house still wrapped in silence, the kind of silence that used to comfort me, but now felt like a reminder of everything missing. I walked down the hall toward Scarlett's room, the soft sound of her rhythmic breathing drifting through the narrow crack in the door. I didn't open it. Instead, I stood there with my hand resting on the wood, letting the quiet settle around me. I told myself I should let her sleep, that waking her would only set her off into another difficult morning. But the truth was, I lingered because I didn't know how to fill the hours ahead without thinking of what had happened yesterday. The spoon, the tiny swallow, the look she gave Emily, the look I couldn't forget. By the time the sun broke through the curtains, I forced myself into motion. Breakfast was simple oatmeal, soft fruit, small spoon, small steps. But for the first time, Scarlett didn't immediately turn her face away. She didn't reach for the food either, but she watched. She watched me in a way that made my chest tighten. When she swallowed a single small bite, barely more than a warm smear on her tongue, I felt my eyes sting. I didn't cry. I wouldn't let myself. But something inside me cracked open the same place that had been shut tight for years. I spent the morning tending to work, though my mind wasn't in it. Every meeting felt distant, every number blurred. I excused myself early and returned to the living room where Scarlett was sitting in her wheelchair, tapping lightly on the armrest in her usual slow rhythm. I didn't realize I was staring until my phone buzzed sharply in my pocket. A notification from the front gate security system. Visitor approaching. My brow furrowed. I wasn't expecting anyone. I tapped the screen to view the camera feed, and my heart stumbled when the image flickered into view. Emily. She stood at the gate wearing a simple denim jacket, her hair tied back loosely, her tote bag slung over her shoulder as if she was unsure whether to stay or leave. What was she doing here? I didn't move at first. I just stared at the screen as if she were some impossibility conjured from the thoughts I'd refused to admit to. The guard's voice came through the small speaker beside the door. "Sir, she says she's here to return something. Should I send her away?" A rush of panic hit me sharp, sudden. "No, let her in!" My voice cracked. Then I cleared my throat. "Let her in." A moment later, the heavy metal gate slid open and I watched through the window as she walked slowly up the driveway, her steps cautious, her eyes taking in the size of the house with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. I opened the door before she had a chance to knock. For a second, neither of us spoke. She stood there holding a small plastic bag in her hands, looking both brave and nervous in a way that made my pulse kick up. "Hi," she finally said, her voice softer than the morning light. I swallowed hard. "Hi." She lifted the bag slightly. "You left Scarlett's blanket at the diner yesterday. I washed it and thought, well, I figured she might need it." I reached out and took the bag from her, my fingers brushing hers for a split second that felt far longer than it should. "Thank you, Emily," I said quietly. "You didn't have to do that." Her expression shifted, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "I know. That's why I did it." Before I could say anything else, a soft sound drifted from behind me. A faint tapping. Scarlett. Emily's eyes darted past my shoulder, and for the first time she saw the house from the inside. The high ceilings, the polished floors, the expensive furniture that suddenly felt excessive. Then her gaze landed on Scarlett sitting just a few feet away. Something in her face softened instantly. "Scarlett," she whispered, stepping forward slightly. "I didn't invite her in. I didn't need to." She moved as if drawn by instinct. When she reached a few feet away, she crouched down to eye level like she had done in the diner. "Hey, sweetheart," she murmured. "I brought your blanket back. I hope that's okay." Scarlett blinked. Her fingers stopped tapping. Emily's breath caught so quietly I barely noticed, but I saw the shift in her eyes. The hope, the fear, the tenderness. Something I had no right to feel jealous of, yet felt anyway. Can she hold it?" Emily asked, gesturing toward the blanket. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Emily reached into the bag, pulled out the soft pink blanket, and held it up gently. The moment Scarlett saw it, her eyes flickered in recognition. Emily extended it slowly, giving her time to respond. And then, with a motion that nearly buckled my knees, Scarlett reached forward. Her fingers brushed the fabric curled around it and pulled it to her chest. Emily let out a shaky exhale, her eyes glistening. "I didn't mean to intrude," she whispered. I couldn't stop thinking about her." I stood there, frozen, the weight of her words settling over me. "I couldn't stop thinking about you either," hovered in my throat, unspoken, but dangerously close. Instead, I managed something safer. "Do you want to come in for a moment?" Emily hesitated, her eyes widening slightly as she looked past me at the house again. "I'm not sure I belong in a place like this." I shook my head. "It's not the place that matters, it's the people inside it." She swallowed, uncertainty flickering across her face. Then finally, slowly, she stepped over the threshold. And just like that, the air in the house shifted, softened, brightened, as if her presence carried something the walls had forgotten how to hold. Something warm, something alive, something that felt terrifyingly like the beginning of hope. After Emily stepped into the house that morning, the air felt different, not lighter exactly, but charged, as if the walls themselves were paying attention. She walked with a kind of hesitant care, her steps quiet, her eyes drawn again and again toward Scarlett, who still held the soft blanket against her chest. I led us toward the living room, though my mind raced ahead of my body with thoughts I didn't dare say out loud. Emily stopped beside the armchair, taking everything in the kind of home that looked polished but felt empty because it had been for so long. She glanced toward the large photo frame above the fireplace, a picture taken back when life had direction. My wife smiling with her arms wrapped around Scarlett back before everything fractured. Emily's gaze softened gently, and she turned to me as if waiting for me to say something, some explanation, some truth. But the words tangled in my throat, so I settled for the simplest thing I could offer. "Can I get you some water?" She nodded, and I disappeared into the kitchen more to steady myself than to actually get the glass. I leaned on the counter, my pulse thumping unevenly. What was I doing inviting her in? Opening a door? I wasn't sure I had the strength to hold open. I filled the glass slowly, buying seconds I didn't have. Then I returned to the living room and found Emily sitting cross-legged on the floor, directly in front of Scarlett. My breath caught. Scarlett had her eyes on her. Not through her, not past her, but on her. Emily wasn't talking at her or giving instructions. She was just sitting humming softly as she folded the blanket into a small, neat shape, and then carefully unfolded it again. Scarlett watched every movement, her fingers twitching lightly, wanting to mimic the motion, but hesitant. Emily noticed, and she slowed her hands deliberately, saying nothing, only giving space, encouraging with nothing more than her presence. After a few seconds, Scarlett lifted her hands and tried to fold a corner. It was messy, uneven, but it was a choice she made all on her own. Emily let out a breathless laugh, a soft, genuine sound that seemed to warm the entire room. I'd never heard anything like it, at least not directed at us. I stepped closer, handing her the water. She took it with a grateful nod and said quietly, "She's trying. You know, she wants to connect. She's just scared." I swallowed, my throat suddenly tight. Is this really what progress looks like? Emily smiled gently, not looking away from Scarlett. Sometimes progress looks like tiny steps repeated 100 times before one of them becomes steady. My chest ached, hearing that, because it was something my wife used to say in her own way. Emily must have sensed the shift in me because she glanced up, her hazel eyes flickering across my face. "Are you okay?" I didn't lie. "I don't know." Her expression softened further, and she didn't push. Instead, she turned back to Scarlett, giving her a moment of quiet protection, something I realized no one ever gave me after a while. She stood brushing her hands against her jeans. "Well, I should probably go. I don't want to overstep." She looked toward the door as if concerned she had already done too much, and I reacted faster than I meant to. "No, stay a little longer." She blinked, surprised. I cleared my throat, lowering my voice. "If you want, I mean." She nodded slowly, sitting back down, but this time I saw something I hadn't seen earlier. Doubt, not in Scarlett, not in me, but in herself. It was subtle, buried beneath her gentleness, but it was there in the way her fingers fidgeted in her lap, in the way she avoided holding eye contact too long, in the way her shoulders tensed every time Scarlett shifted as if she feared misreading something I didn't want to pry. But doubt hung around her like a shadow by noon. She stood again, this time for real. "I really should go. I have another shift tonight." I walked her to the door. Scarlett's eyes followed her, leaving a tiny ache behind. Emily reached the doorway, paused, and turned to me, her voice soft. "Was she always like this before?" "Your wife passed, or did things change?" After the question hit me harder than I expected, I wasn't offended, but the truth twisted in my chest. "She was always quiet, always gentle," I said slowly, "but after the accident, after losing her mother, she just sank deeper into herself." Emily nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes. Before she stepped outside, she paused again, as if battling with something. She almost said something more, but instead she offered a soft half-smile, then headed down the driveway. I watched her walk away longer than I should have. The house felt colder after she left, emptier. Scarlett turned her head toward the door, her fingers resuming that quiet, rhythmic tapping, and guilt stabbed through me, sharp and unwelcome. Because even though she was the one who had made progress, she was also the one losing something each time Emily walked away. The afternoon dragged sluggishly. Doubt pushed at the edges of my thoughts, scraping against every piece of hope I had tried to hold on to. Had she really come today? Was it only about the blanket or something? She wasn't saying. Was she second-guessing everything like I was? Did she regret getting involved with us? Was I reading too much into the way she looked at me? The questions looped endlessly until they spilled into the evening, but the real trouble came at dinner. I set Scarlett's bowl in front of her as usual. Soft food, small portion, gentle approach. She stared at it blankly, then away. Then she pushed it aside. My shoulders tensed, sweetheart. Please, just one bite. Her fingers curled tight against the armrest. She looked at me, but not with the openness she'd shown earlier when Emily was here. Instead, she looked lost, adrift, as if something had been given to her and then taken away. I tried again, my voice softer than before. Scarlett, please for me. But she turned her head again, that tiny sliver of connection we had gained in the morning, slipping right through my fingers, frustration and fear tangled in my gut, not anger at her, never her, but at myself, at the situation, at the feeling that I was once again failing her. When I finally tucked her into bed, she clutched the pink blanket to her chest, her eyes half open as if waiting for someone else, someone who wasn't me. When the house grew quiet, I walked to the back porch, letting the cold air wrap around me. Doubt followed me out there, heavy, relentless. I replayed every moment from earlier. The ways Emily's expression flickered, the hesitation in her voice, the way she looked at me like she wanted to trust me, but didn't trust herself. Something is holding her back, I murmured to the night. Something she hasn't told me, and the worst part was, I wasn't sure what scared me more. The thought that she might pull away forever, or the realization that I was already too far in to pretend I didn't care. The next morning began the same way every morning began, with the soft hum of the house settling into itself, the faint clicking of the heater turning on, and the quiet rustle of Scarlett shifting in her room. But something felt different even before I opened my eyes. Maybe it was the heaviness in my chest, or maybe it was the lingering image of Emily's small, sad smile when she stepped off my porch. Whatever it was, it clung to me as I got up, brewed coffee, and moved through the motions of a life that no longer fit. Right. Scarlett was quieter than usual, even for her. She kept her gaze low, hands still, except for the gentle stroking of her blanket. I tried to brush her hair, but she pulled away, just barely enough to sting then, as I was tying her shoelaces. The doorbell rang. Not the soft, careful knock Emily always used, but a sharp, impatient buzz that put me immediately on edge. Scarlett stiffened her fingers, curling tighter around the blanket. I stood, slowly half expecting a delivery or a neighbor, but when I opened the door, the breath caught in my throat. Emily stood there, but not the Emily I had seen yesterday. This Emily was tense, her face pale, her hands clenched tightly around the strap of a worn bag. Her eyes not warm, but guarded, hollow, like she had not slept at all. My heart lurched. Emily, are you all right? She didn't answer. Instead, she scanned the street behind her as if checking whether someone had followed her. Then she stepped inside, hurriedly pushing the door shut with a shaky breath. Can we talk somewhere private? She whispered, her voice trembling in a way that set off alarm bells inside me. I guided her to the living room, where Scarlett sat, watching quietly. Emily's eyes softened for a brief moment at the sight of her, but the softness vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by something closer to dread. I sat across from her waiting, giving her the silence she clearly needed. She took a breath, steadying herself before she finally met my eyes. Someone from my past found me last night. The words were barely audible, but they hit like a stone in water, sending ripples through everything. I thought I understood. My pulse quickened. What do you mean, someone? Her hands tightened again, her knuckles white. His name is Ryan, she said, her voice cracking slightly, and he knows where I live again. The name meant nothing to me but the fear behind it, the fear I recognized. Emily looked down, swallowing hard. The room felt painfully still. Scarlett stared at her, her eyes wide, unblinking. Emily continued slowly, as if each word was being dragged out of her. I left my old life to escape him, to escape all of it, The pressure, the guilt, the mistakes I made with Caleb. Her voice faltered, so I started over. No one knew me here, and I liked it that way, but he showed up again last night outside my building asking questions. Her breath shook and her eyes flickered to mine, asking for belief, begging for it. I felt something harden inside me, a protective instinct older than logic. What does he want? Her eyes darkened. Everything I tried to run from, she whispered, everything I wasn't strong enough to face before I could speak. She looked away again, her voice dropping to a small, fragile sound. I thought I was done with that part of my life. I thought I could be someone new here, but I guess I was wrong. The weight of her words pressed against the room, against my ribs, against the part of me that had been trying to keep a safe distance from her and failing miserably before I could respond. Scarlett shifted from her seat. Her blanket dragged against the floor, and then something unexpected, something small and tender happened. She reached toward Emily. Not much, just a tiny movement, her fingertips brushing the air, almost hesitant, as if offering comfort, even though she didn't know why. Emily froze, tears filling her eyes as she looked at Scarlett, sweet girl. She whispered, her voice breaking on the second word. You don't even know me, but she did in her own way, in the quiet way of children who understood fear without needing explanations. Emily inhaled shakily, wiping her eyes, but her hands still trembled. She whispered, I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't drag you into this, but I didn't know where else to go. The raw honesty of her voice struck me deeper than anything she had said before. I leaned forward. Emily, look at me. She hesitated, then raised her eyes slowly. I held her gaze for a long moment before saying firmly, You're not alone anymore. You don't have to protect yourself from everything by running. Not now. Not with us. Her lips trembled again, and for a split second, something in her expression softened. Something like hope, but it vanished quickly, replaced by fear. She stood abruptly. I need to go. I can't stay here. Her voice shaking with panic. I rose too. Emily, stop running, please. She flinched, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. I can't, she whispered. I'm not good for anyone. I wasn't good enough for Caleb. I won't make that mistake again. I stepped closer, lowering my voice, not demanding just steady, you didn't fail. Him, Emily. Her breath hitched. She opened her mouth to argue, but no sound came out. You loved him, I said softly, and love isn't failure. She shook her head, tears spilling now, but I saw something in her gaze, a fracture widening, a truth she didn't want to admit. She backed away, her hand reaching for the door. I have to go, she whispered again, more to herself than to me, but just as she touched the doorknob, Scarlett made a small sound, a soft, aching sound, neither cry nor call, just a single whispered syllable. Ma. Emily froze. Her entire body went still. I didn't breathe. Scarlett repeated the sound, almost a hum, her gaze fixed on Emily, her fingers trembling and reaching again. The world seemed to stop. The air pressed tight against my lungs. Emily turned slowly, like she was afraid to believe what she had heard. Her voice cracked as she knelt to Scarlett's level. Sweetheart, did you mean me? Scarlett lifted her hand, placed it against Emily's cheek, and let out a soft breath. It wasn't a word, not fully, but it was connection, fragile, pure, unfiltered. Emily broke her tears, falling freely as she cupped Scarlett's tiny hand against her face. Then she looked up at me, eyes shaking with fear and longing, and something that looked dangerously close to surrender. I don't know how to stay, she whispered, voice fractured, and I don't know how to walk away again. And for the first time, I understood this wasn't about her past or Ryan or running. This was the moment her past stepped forward and demanded to be faced, and whether she liked it or not, whether I was ready or not, we were already standing in it together. Emily stayed frozen in the doorway for a long moment, her hand still resting on the knob, her breath shaking against the silence that had swallowed the room. Scarlett's small hand remained on her cheek, warm, steady, fragile, but certain, and I watched Emily crumble in the gentlest way possible. Not with a dramatic collapse, but with a quiet exhale, the kind a person releases only when something inside them finally breaks open. She closed her eyes, trembling, then slowly lowered her hand away from the door as if surrendering to something she no longer had the strength to resist. She whispered, "I don't understand why she reaches for me." And I heard the tremor beneath her voice, the fear of attachment, the fear of losing again, the fear of herself. I stepped closer. Not too close. Not enough to overwhelm her. Just enough that she could feel she wasn't standing at that crossroads alone. "Emily, she reaches for people who make her feel safe." She opened her eyes, and for the first time since she walked in, she looked at Scarlett not with confusion, but with aching tenderness, like she was seeing not a child, but a reminder of the love she used to give freely before the world taught her. It was dangerous. Then, without warning, there was a sharp knock at the door. Not the hesitant kind, but the kind that carried authority, weight, and threat. Scarlett jerked her hand back instantly, retreating behind the couch. Emily's face went pale color, draining so fast I thought she might collapse. She whispered, "He found me." My pulse surged, adrenaline spreading fast through my limbs, but I forced my voice to stay calm. "Emily, who is he?" before she could answer. The knock came again, louder, firmer this time. "Open up, Emily Lane." I froze. Lane, like Caleb Lane. Like the last name she had quietly tried to bury, like a gravestone still heavy over her life. Emily shook her head, stepping back, panic blooming across her face. "I told him to stay away. I told him to leave me alone." I moved between her and the door, my instincts overtaking everything else. Emily pressed a hand to her mouth, muffling a broken sound. The third knock didn't come. Instead, a voice spoke colder than winter. Ryan Lane. Emily's older brother. From everything I had uncovered, the voice belonged to a man shattered by grief and twisted by guilt, the kind that came from loving someone and failing to save them. I opened the door halfway, keeping my body between him and Emily. Ryan stood there, tall, sharp angles and restless eyes filled with something dangerous. Not violent, but desperate. The desperation of a man trying to fix something that was already beyond repair. He looked me up and down, dismissing me immediately before his eyes snapped toward Emily behind me. His jaw tightened. "Emily, please." His voice cracked, not with anger, but agony. "Please, come home." Emily flinched, her fingers gripping the fabric of the couch like a lifeline. Ryan swallowed, looking older than he probably was, his voice thick with the weight he carried. "I can't lose you too, Emily." The way he said it made my chest tighten, because this wasn't a villain. This wasn't danger in the form we feared. This was a brother drowning, trying to pull his sister under to keep her from drifting too far away. Emily's lips trembled. "Ryan, you shouldn't be here. Not after last night. I told you I'm not coming back." Ryan stepped forward, but I blocked the doorway. His voice sharpened, not at me, but at the fear slipping through him. "You left, Emily. You left, and you didn't even give us a chance to understand. You were hurting, too. We lost him together, and then you disappeared, like we didn't matter." Emily's eyes filled, tears streaming silently. She whispered, "You kept blaming me." His face cracked, and there it was, the fracture in the story, the hidden truth, the wound he carried. Ryan's voice dropped barely audible. "I wasn't blaming you. I was blaming myself." Emily shook her head, but he shook his harder. "Desperate. I pushed him to that camp trip. You said he wasn't feeling well, but I ignored you because I wanted one day of quiet, one day where you rested, and I ruined everything." Emily gasped, like the air had been ripped from her lungs, and suddenly everything collided, the grief she carried, the guilt. He held the years they spent suffering alone instead of together. Ryan stepped forward, his eyes shining. He wasn't supposed to die. "Emily," he whispered, "he wasn't supposed to leave us, and I didn't know how to survive that without blaming someone if I blamed you. Then I didn't have to look at myself." Emily covered her mouth, sobbing silently, and Scarlett peered from behind the couch, her eyes wide with confusion and empathy. A sound broke from Emily, a raw, fragile sound before she whispered, "Ryan, I can't be who I was before. I can't live in that house. I can't breathe in that town. Not with the memories." Ryan nodded, tears spilling. "Now, I know, but I also know you're hiding, and it's killing you. I didn't come here to drag you back. I came here because I miss my sister." Emily stared at him, shaking, not trusting herself to move. Ryan wiped his eyes, then added softly, and because Caleb would hate seeing us like this. Emily collapsed into a sob, her entire body trembling as years of grief and guilt crashed outward in one violent wave. I stepped back, giving them space, but Ryan shook his head and looked at me, his voice steadying. "Thank you for protecting her, for giving her a place to breathe." I didn't respond because I couldn't trust my own voice. After a long moment, Emily stepped out from behind the couch, hesitating, then she walked toward her brother, each step fragile but honest. Ryan opened his arms not wide, not demanding just enough, and she fell into him, her sobs cracking the air like thunder. He held her, his chin trembling against her hair. "I'm sorry," he whispered over and over until her breathing steadied. Scarlett watched them, then slowly walked forward, placing her small hand on Emily's leg. Emily looked down, tears slipping again, but this time they were different, stripped of fear, softened by truth. She knelt, pulling Scarlett gently into the embrace. And for the first time, I saw a picture not of broken pieces colliding, but of broken pieces beginning to fit. Ryan finally pulled back, glancing between the three of us, a ghost of a smile on his lips. He whispered, "Take care of her." I nodded. "You have my word." He turned to leave, but paused long enough to say, "Emily, you're allowed to build a life that doesn't hurt." She swallowed, nodding barely, and then he left the door, closing softly behind him. Emily sagged against me, exhausted, shaking but lighter somehow, like a storm had passed through her and taken some of the darkness away. She whispered, "I didn't expect everything to break open today, but maybe it needed to." I wrapped an arm around her, steadying her, and for the first time, she leaned into me without hesitation, without fear. Because what had just collided wasn't chaos, it was healing in its roughest form, and it was only the beginning. I did not sleep that night, not even for a minute. My mind kept replaying everything. The knock at the door, the trembling in Emily's voice, the way her brother's guilt spilled out like an old wound torn open again, the way Scarlett reached for her at the very moment she needed it most, and somewhere in that chaos, in that mess of pain and healing, I realized something had shifted between us, not in a sudden dramatic way, but in small, quiet ways, the kind that stay with you long after the moment has passed. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows. Warm, soft, gentle, the opposite of everything stirring inside me. Emily sat at the table, her fingers wrapped around a mug of coffee. She wasn't drinking. Her hair was pulled to one side, her face bare of makeup. But she looked different, like the weight she carried had been lightened, even if just a little. I glanced at Scarlett, who sat in her chair, tapping her spoon rhythmically. A sound that always calmed her, then back at Emily. She didn't look. Away this time, she met my eyes and held my gaze in a way she hadn't before. A way that made my chest tighten. She spoke first, her voice low, steady. "Thank you." My breath caught for what? For not letting me fall apart, alone. I reached for her hand without thinking, but she flinched, just a small involuntary movement. Then she forced herself to relax, her fingers settling over mine. The touch was light, hesitant. "Honest," I whispered. "You're allowed to lean on someone." "Emily," she looked at our hands, her voice barely audible. "I'm just not used to it." I wanted to tell her she could get used to me, but I didn't, not yet. Instead, I squeezed her hand gently, just enough to say, "I'm here." And she didn't pull away by midday. The house was too quiet. Scarlett curled on the couch, humming to herself, while Emily sat on the other end, folding laundry. Something about the scene made my chest feel too tight. Domestic quiet, fragile, beautiful. I watched her smooth a tiny shirt over her knee, her fingers moving with instinct, and I wondered how many years she had spent caring for someone else, even when no one cared for her. Emily noticed me watching what she asked softly. I hesitated, then said something I hadn't planned. "I want to show you something." Her brows lifted uncertainly. "What is it?" "It's about me," I said, and somehow those words made the air shift. She glanced at Scarlett, then back at me. "Is it safe for her to stay here?" "Yes," I said. "It isn't dangerous. Just personal." Emily nodded hesitantly, and I gestured for her to follow me. I led her down the hallway by the staircase. There was a small door, one she had never opened because I had never invited anyone to open it. Not even my closest friends. I unlocked it and pushed it open. Emily stepped inside and froze. The room was small, dimly lit, the air cool from lack of use. But the moment she took a step forward, her breath caught. The walls were lined with framed photographs. I watched her eyes scan them one by one. Pictures of Lily before the accident, pictures of her mother smiling, with her at the beach, pictures of the three of us in the short year we had together, pictures of my wife's laughter frozen in time, pictures of Lily walking, holding her mother's hand, her curls bouncing in the sun. Emily covered her mouth, tears pooling instantly. I had never told her the full story. I wasn't ready until now, I whispered. Lily wasn't born. Disabled. It happened suddenly when she was 3. The air went still. Emily's hand trembled as she reached for one picture, her fingers hovering over the glass as if afraid to touch it. She whispered, "What happened?" I swallowed the memory, always sharp. Even years later, she had a seizure, a violent one. She was in my wife's arms when it happened. She collapsed, and I reached them both too late. We spent weeks in the hospital, and when she woke up, she couldn't move, the same. She couldn't speak, the same. She couldn't understand the world, the same. Emily's knees bent as if the story knocked the strength out of her. She braced her hand on the shelf, her voice. "Cracking your wife?" she asked. I nodded. She died 2 months later. Complications from stress, heart failure. She held the guilt until it killed her. Emily pressed shaking fingers against her lips. Horrified, Gavin, "Why didn't you tell me?" I exhaled, trembling, because I didn't know how to let anyone see this room, because no one ever walked in here without me falling apart, and I didn't want to fall apart in front of anyone except maybe you. Emily's breath hitched. She turned slowly until she faced me, tears slipping free. "You lost everything," I whispered. "I did, and Lily lost even more." Emily stepped closer, her voice delicate, fragile like wind brushing against glass. "How do you live with that?" I looked at her for a long time, then said quietly, "I don't live with it, I carry it, and some days that's all I can do." She stared at me, her eyes shining with a mixture of grief and empathy, and then something changed in her gaze, something deeper, something raw. She whispered, "And you still chose to love her? You still chose to be her father when the world fell apart around you?" I swallowed hard because she understood. She saw me not as a man with wealth or status, but as a father still trying to hold the pieces of his family together. She stepped closer again, her voice shaking. "Gavin, you're stronger than you know." I shook my head. "No, I'm just a man who refuses to let the people he loves disappear like she did." Emily's chest rose and fell quickly, her eyes fixed on mine, and suddenly the space between us felt charged like something powerful waiting to ignite. She whispered, "Why me? Why show me this room?" I answered without thinking, "Because you're the first person who hasn't looked away, because you're the first person who made Lily feel safe again, because you're the first person who made me remember what hope feels like." Emily's lips parted slightly, trembling, her voice breaking, "Gavin." She didn't finish because a small sound cut through the air, a soft whimper. "Scarlett." Emily turned instantly, rushing to her. Scarlett, curled into the corner of the couch, trembling, her hands pressed against her ears, overwhelmed by silence and emotion. Emily dropped to her knees instantly, wrapping her arms around her, gently rubbing her back, humming softly the same lullaby she once sang to her brother, the same one that calmed Lily weeks ago. I stood at the doorway watching something I had never seen before, watching Emily become the safest place Scarlett had ever known. Watching Scarlett melt into her arms, like she had been waiting her whole life for that exact embrace. Emily looked up at me, her eyes full of something that made my breath catch. This wasn't just connection, this wasn't just healing. This was beginning in its purest form, and the truth hit me like a pulse. Deep and unstoppable. If she ever left again, my world would collapse. But if she stayed, everything would change forever. Fear has a sound. I had never noticed it before, but in that quiet living room with Scarlett still trembling in Emily's arms, it was unmistakable. The soft, uneven breaths, the shaking hands, the way her fingers clung to Emily's sleeve like it was the only anchor she had left, and watching them, Something inside me twisted, not in panic, not in helplessness, but in something else, something deeper, something I had been trying not to name for weeks. Emily held Scarlett with a gentleness that felt almost holy, humming softly, her voice steady even while her shoulders trembled. I stepped closer slowly, not wanting to startle either of them. Emily looked up at me, eyes glassy but focused. "It's okay," she whispered. "She's just overwhelmed." I nodded, crouching beside them, my hand hovering for a moment before I placed it over Scarlett's small back. My voice barely above a breath, "Sweetheart, we're right here." Scarlett's trembling eased just slightly, her fingers still curled in Emily's shirt. Emily brushed the girl's hair back from her forehead, humming the same soft tune I had heard her sing to Lily that night in the doorway. The memory hit me like a wave, and suddenly the weight of everything inside me shifted. Fear didn't grip my lungs anymore. Something else did. Hope. I whispered Emily's name without meaning to. She lifted her head, her eyes finding mine in the dim glow of the lamp. There was emotion there, so raw it made my chest ache. She whispered, "Gavin, I don't know if I can do this." I frowned. "Do what?" "This," she said, her voice cracking. "Be this person for you, for her, for myself." I don't trust myself, not after everything. I sat down fully on the floor beside her, the hardwood cool against my legs. "Emily," I said gently, "you don't have to be anything. You're not." She looked away. "No, Gavin, you don't understand. I'm terrified. Terrified of losing someone again, of caring too much, of letting myself hope, of loving someone who might not stay." My breath caught the word hung between us. Heavy, trembling love. She didn't take it back. She didn't pretend she hadn't said it. Instead, her shoulders fell as if she had been holding that word inside for years, afraid to let it out, afraid of what it might change. "Emily," I whispered, "you don't have to run anymore." She shook her head, her voice shaking. "I don't run because I want to. I run because it's the only thing that ever kept me from breaking completely." I leaned closer, my voice low, steady. "But you're not breaking. You're healing." She closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. I don't know how to believe that I reached up, brushing the tear with my thumb gently, then letting my hand rest against her jaw. Emily opened her eyes and the world seemed to narrow to just the two of us. Scarlett's trembling slowed her breath, steadied her fingers, loosening their desperate hold. Emily watched her, then looked back at me, her voice almost inaudible. "How did you do it? How did you keep going after losing so much?" "Because I had to," I said quietly, "for Lily. Because she deserved a father who didn't give up on her. And now she deserves someone who reminds her what love looks like. Again." Emily swallowed hard, her lips parting slightly. "And you think that's me?" My voice didn't waver. "I know it is." She stared at me for a moment, long enough for fear to flicker in her gaze. Then something else washed over her, something warm, something brave. She whispered, "I'm scared, Gavin." I nodded, moving just an inch closer. So was I the first time I held Lily after her diagnosis. I was so scared I'd fail her that I'd never be enough. But I learned something. Fear isn't a sign to run. It's a sign that something matters, and right now, you matter. Emily's lips trembled, her breath shaking out of her. "I don't know if I can trust myself." I leaned my forehead against hers gently. "You don't have to trust yourself right away. Trust me, trust us, trust what's happening here." Scarlett shifted slightly, her hand brushing Emily's, a soft sigh escaping her lips. Emily's eyes widened. She whispered, "She trusts me, Gavin." I smiled softly. "It's because you see her. Not her disability, not her diagnosis, not the world's expectations. You see her the way you see me." She looked, overwhelmed, then softly, painfully hopeful, and for the first time she didn't look away. She held my gaze as if she were letting herself consider a world where she didn't have to run, a world where she could choose something different. Choose someone. Choose us. Scarlett slept still, wrapped safely in Emily's arms. Neither of us moved. "We didn't want to break the moment," I whispered. "Can I show you something?" She blinked slowly, uncertainly. "What?" I reached for her hand, gently lifting it with mine. guiding her fingers to my chest, right over my heartbeat. Her breath caught Gavin. I exhaled, shaking slightly. This is what you do to me every time you walk into a room, every time you look at her, the way you do, every time you're brave, even when you think you're not. You make my heart remember what it feels like to be alive. Emily pressed her lips together, emotion flooding her expression. She whispered, Gavin, please don't say things like that unless you mean them. I squeezed her hand firmly. I mean every word. Her breath shuddered out of her, and she whispered, I'm not used to being chosen. I cupped her face, careful, gentle, steady, then let her see the truth in my eyes. You are now. She leaned into my touch, shifting closer until our foreheads touched again, her voice shaking. Gavin, I don't know how to do this, I whispered back. Then let me show you not how to love, but how to let yourself be loved. Emily's eyes softened, then closed slowly as if she were finally surrendering. Not to me, but to herself. When she spoke again, her voice trembled. Gavin, if I stay, I need you to understand something. I waited, my heartbeat pounding. I'm still healing. I'm still learning how to breathe again, how to hope again, how to exist without fear. I nodded, my voice low. I know. She opened her eyes, and there was something new in them, something fragile but powerful. Then, I need you to be patient with me always. And in that moment, everything in me settled. I reached out, brushing my thumb along her cheekbone, tender, slow, certain. I whispered, Emily. I'll wait as long as you need her. Breath caught a soft sound escaping her, like letting go of a weight she had carried too long, and then she whispered, okay, and that one word, that single fragile trembling, okay, was the moment fear finally turned into something else, something that felt dangerously close to love. Her name was barely a whisper on Scarlett's lips, but it was enough to freeze the entire world around us. The soft, fragile sound slipped out like a secret she had been holding in her tiny, trembling chest for longer than any child should. Lily. Scarlett breathed, her voice small and raspy from emotion. I thought I misheard. I thought maybe my heart wanted to hear it so badly that it invented it. But Emily's head snapped up, her eyes wide, her breath catching in midair before she whispered, Did she just? And then Scarlett lifted her head again, her gaze drifting not to me, but to Emily as she whispered the name once more. Lily, my daughter's name, my little girl's name, the one she hadn't spoken in almost 3 years. Not since the night everything changed, the night her mother died. The name had become a ghost, a memory spoken only inside hospital rooms or whispered by teachers who didn't know any better. She had never said it aloud, not once, not to me, not to anyone, and now in Emily's arms she breathed it out like a prayer. Something inside me fractured in the most beautiful, devastating way. Emily's hand flew to her mouth, tears filling her eyes. My God! Gavin! She said it. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I felt something heavy in my chest break open, and for the first time in years I could breathe without the weight of grief crushing me. Scarlett blinked her fingers, brushing Emily's cheek before she looked at me, her eyes clearer than I had ever seen them. Daddy! She whispered the word, stumbling out of her like she wasn't sure if it would be allowed. My knees buckled. I sank down in front of her, feeling the world tilt around me. Yes, sweetheart, I'm here. She lifted a hand slowly, uncertainly, like she was reaching for something she wasn't sure she deserved, and Emily gently guided her tiny fingers to my face the moment her hand touched my cheek. My entire body shook. It was the first time my little girl had willingly reached for me since she lost her mother. The first time she had looked at both of us with something other than confusion or numbness. Emily didn't say a word. She just watched, holding Scarlett steady. Both of us. Steady the name. Emily whispered again. Her voice cracked but steady. She said, Lily. She said her name. Gavin. My mind raced back to the old pictures, the hospital reports, the therapist notes, all the words filled with sterile phrases like regression, trauma, dissociation, the way every expert had told me. She might never speak again. Not meaningful speech, not connected speech. They told me to prepare for a future where her world would always stay quiet, and here she was, breaking through the silence with one name. A name tied to love, tied to loss, tied to the last moment she had seen her mother alive. Emily brushed a hand over Scarlett's hair, carefully, gently, as if the moment might shatter if she moved too fast. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "do you remember?" "Lily." Scarlett blinked, her voice barely there. "Baby sister," she whispered. I felt the air leave my lungs, not in pain, but in something so sharp and beautiful it terrified me. I had never told Emily the full truth. I had never told her that the night my wife died, she had been carrying our second child, that we had lost both of them in one night, and that Scarlett had been in the car, too unconscious, terrified, waking to a world without her mother and without the baby sister she had been waiting for. Emily's eyes flicked to mine, realization crashing into her like lightning. "She knows," she whispered. "She remembers. She always has." I nodded, swallowing hard. I never told her to forget. I just didn't know she remembered anything from that night. Scarlett's hand trembled against my cheek, and when I lowered my forehead to hers, she whispered, "Sorry, Daddy, not your fault, sweetheart." I choked, "Not ever." She clung to my shirt, tiny fingers gripping it like she thought I might disappear, and Emily put her arms around both of us, holding us together like we were pieces of something she refused to let fall apart. The living room was quiet, except for soft breaths and the slow, steady thud of forgiveness settling into the room. Emily finally spoke. Her voice gentle. "Gavin, she remembers. Love, not loss." I nodded, because somehow she was right. Scarlett hadn't said car, or accident, or mommy. She had said Lily, her baby sister's name, not tied to grief, but tied to memory, tied to something pure, something warm, something still alive inside her. Emily's hand brushed my arm, grounding me, steadying me. "She isn't lost," she whispered. "She's finding her way back, and she came back through you, and through me, and through love." Scarlett looked up at Emily, then slowly lifted her small hand, reaching for her face. Emily froze, then leaned in, letting the little girl touch her cheek, the way she had touched mine, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Hi, sweetheart." Scarlett blinked, then said something I never thought I would hear her say, "Mommy." Emily gasped, not out of joy, but out of heartbreak and confusion, and something deeper layered with pain and hope and fear all at once. "No. No, sweetheart," she whispered, stroking Scarlett's cheek softly. "I'm not Mommy, but I'm here. I'm here, as long as you want me." Scarlett leaned forward, resting her head against Emily's shoulder, the tiniest nod against her collarbone, and Emily wrapped her arms around her, letting the girl melt into her chest like she had been waiting years for a place to rest. "Gavin," Emily whispered, her voice shaking. "She trusts me. She trusts you more than anyone," I said softly. "She trusts you because you're safe, because you see her, because you love her." Emily looked at me startled, like she hadn't realized it until that moment. "Love." "Gavin," I shook my head gently. "No, you don't have to say it yet, but she feels it. She wouldn't come back like this if she didn't." Emily swallowed hard, tears falling silently. "Maybe," I whispered, "maybe this is the moment everything changes. Maybe this is the moment she comes back. Maybe this is the moment we all do." Emily looked down at Scarlett, then back at me and whispered, "Gavin, what does this mean?" "It means," I said softly with a steadiness I didn't know I had, "that everything we thought was broken never really was. It was just waiting for the right person, the right moment, the right love to bring us home." The moment Scarlett said that single impossible word, the air in the room shifted like something ancient and heavy had finally decided to lift itself from our shoulders. Emily froze, her arms wrapped protectively around Scarlett, who rested her head against her chest. The soft glow from the lamp painted their silhouettes in warm golden light, and for a moment the world stopped. Not in fear, not in grief, but in awe. I walked closer slowly, almost afraid to breathe, afraid to disturb the miracle. Unfolding inches from me, Scarlett's small hand clung to Emily's shirt, clutching it the way she used to cling to her mother's scarf years ago when she was still learning how to walk. Emily looked down at her eyes, glassy, her breath trembling as she whispered, "Sweetheart, I am here, but I am not your mommy." Scarlett didn't move, didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled tighter into Emily's shirt, as if her little body knew something her mind was still learning. that safety didn't always come from the past. Sometimes it came from the person holding you right now. Emily pressed her cheek against Scarlett's hair, her voice breaking as she whispered again, "I'm here, sweet girl. I promise I am here." Scarlett shifted slightly, then through a small shaky breath, she whispered, "Love you." Emily gasped a sound, raw, fragile. Beautiful. Lily's name had broken something open, but these two words rebuilt everything. I sank onto the couch, overwhelmed, unable to look away because this tiny, fragile moment held more power than power. Anything I had felt since the night my wife died. Emily looked at me, her expression a mixture of shock and something deeper, something luminous. "Gavin," she whispered. Then she laughed, but it wasn't really laughter. It was relief pouring out through trembling lips. She said, "She loved me." Scarlett lifted her head just enough to look at both of us, her eyes still cloudy with confusion, but clearer than I had seen them in years. She reached one hand toward me and one toward Emily, her fingers stretching out as if trying to hold us both at once. And in that instant, I knew this child understood more than anyone gave her credit for. She wasn't replacing her mother. She wasn't confused about who Emily was. She was choosing connection, choosing love, choosing to return to the world, and she wanted both of us with her. I took her tiny hand, holding it gently, as Emily held the other, the three of us forming a small, imperfect circle, but one that felt unbreakable. Emily whispered, "She remembers, she trusts, she chooses." I squeezed Scarlett's hand gently. "She chooses you." Emily swallowed hard, tears dripping onto Scarlett's hair. "She chooses us." The room felt warmer, brighter, like light had been hiding in every shadow, waiting for this exact moment to burst free. Scarlett relaxed again, sinking into Emily's arms, her breathing slowing, her head settling against her shoulder. Emily rocked her slightly instinctively, soothingly, humming softly under her breath. Scarlett's fingers curled into Emily's sleeve and she sighed, a soft, peaceful sound I hadn't heard from her since before the accident. Emily looked at me, and for the first time there was no fear in her eyes. No hesitation, only clarity, warmth, and something that looked dangerously close to love. "Gavin," she whispered, "what do we do now?" I sat beside them, resting my hand on Scarlett's back, feeling the small, steady rise and fall of her breath. "We choose her. We choose us." Emily's breath caught, and she nodded slowly, her forehead brushing against Scarlett's hair like a silent vow, but I wasn't done. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the small velvet box I had hidden there for weeks, waiting for the right moment, hoping, praying there would be when Emily saw it, her eyes widening. "Gavin, no, not now, not when she's—" I shook my head. "This is the moment. This exact one." Emily's breath trembled as she looked down at Scarlett, curled safely in her arms. "Gavin," she whispered, "you don't have to." I leaned closer, my voice low, steady, full of a certainty I hadn't felt in years. "I know I don't have to, but I want to. I want this. I want you. I want her. I want a family with you." Emily's lashes fluttered, her throat working as she tried to speak. "Gavin, I am so scared." I smiled gently. "So am I, but I am more scared of living without you." Emily closed her eyes as if steadying herself, her hand tightening around Scarlett's small fingers when she opened them again. I saw it, the truth she had been holding back for so long, the truth she was finally brave enough to say. She whispered, "I love you, Gavin." I felt my entire chest collapse in on itself and expand all at once. But she wasn't done, her voice breaking as she added, "I love her too." I opened the velvet box, revealing the simple ring inside. Nothing extravagant, nothing flashy, just something honest and real. "Emily Lane, will you marry us?" Emily inhaled sharply, one hand flying to her mouth, the other still wrapped around Scarlett, who stirred slightly but didn't wake. Emily's tears fell silently, landing on Scarlett's hair, and for the first time since I met her, those tears weren't from fear, they were from healing. She nodded once, then again, then again. "Yes," she whispered, her voice cracking into a soft laugh. "Yes, Gavin, yes." I slid the ring onto her finger. my hands shaking more than I expected, and she leaned in, resting her forehead against mine. Scarlett's small hand lifted just enough to touch both our faces, her tiny voice whispering again, "Love you." Emily broke into quiet sobs, holding Scarlett tight, and I wrapped my arms around both of them, and in that small, sunlit room, something shifted forever. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, it wasn't cinematic, it was gentle, steady healing. It was love, choosing to return even when it wasn't expected, even when it wasn't easy. The next morning, Scarlett woke with her hand still in Emily's. The first thing she whispered was Emily's name. The second thing she whispered was Daddy. And when she smiled, soft and real and whole, the entire room felt like dawn breaking open. After years of winter, I lifted Scarlett into my arms. Emily stood beside me, her hand slipping into mine. And for the first time in a very long time, the world didn't feel broken. It felt like light. I looked at the two of them, my daughter and the woman who saved us, and whispered softly, "Welcome home." When the story ends, there is always a quiet moment when the screen softens. The music settles and something inside your chest shifts just a little, like a door you did not realize was locked, finally clicking open. If you felt that while listening to this story, if you found yourself leaning forward, remembering someone you loved, someone you lost, or someone who showed up for you when you least expected it, then stay with me a little longer. Because stories like this are not just about the characters you just met. They are about us. They are about every hard night we survived, every sunrise we did not think we would reach, and every small miracle that arrived dressed as a stranger. Maybe tonight you needed to hear that kindness still matters, that second chances still happen, that healing does not arrive all at once, but in tiny, brave pieces. Maybe you needed to be reminded that even the most broken hearts can still recognize each other in the dark. And maybe, just maybe, you needed to see that love does not disappear when life gets cruel. It waits. It watches. It returns in unexpected forms. Sometimes in a diner booth, sometimes in a shaky smile, sometimes in the hands of someone who never gave up on you. If this story touched something inside you, it is because you carry your own story. A story with pain and resilience, with days you barely held on and days you rose stronger than anyone expected. A story that still deserves softness, hope, and the kind of love that does not demand perfection. I want you to know something, and I hope you let these words settle gently. You are still allowed to feel, to hope, to rebuild. No matter how old you are, no matter how long it has been, no matter how much you have lost. Healing is not a young person's miracle. It belongs to every soul still brave enough to reach for light. And if this story reminded you of that, then imagine what the next ones will do. Here we tell stories that honor people like you, people who have lived enough life to know what real heartbreak feels like, and who still choose love over bitterness, compassion over anger, and softness over silence. Stories that let you breathe again. Stories that remind you that good hearts still exist in a world that moves too fast. Stories that hold your hand for a little while so you do not feel alone in whatever you are carrying today. If this story made you pause, if it stirred something warm in your chest, if it made you whisper yes, I understand that feeling, then I want to invite you to stay. Stay for the next story that will lift you up. Stay for the next moment that will make your heart swell. Stay for the next reminder that life can surprise you even when you think you have seen it all. Subscribe to this channel and join a community of people who believe in compassion and second chances in the quiet beauty of ordinary lives. People who know that love does not always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it comes as a small voice, a gentle hand, a girl feeding another girl a spoonful of soup. Sometimes it comes as a story. And if you let these stories in, they will carry you through the nights that feel too heavy and the mornings that feel too quiet. So if you felt something today, if this story reached the part of you that still hopes even when it hurts, then click subscribe. Not for me, for you. For the reminder that your heart still works, your story still matters, and your life still has chapters waiting to be written in light. Stay with us. Let the next story find you.